I made it a point to only study about one singular case study for each of my global politics exams, so that one single case study can connect to power, legitimacy, sovereignty, any concept you study in global politics. And this time it was Angola, and man, is it a great case study. So I'm gonna talk solely about Angola and Angolan civil war. So stick around, it's a great experience, I think, mostly. Let's start with this. Angola was previously ruled by Portugal and is no longer ruled by Portugal, and that's when we had the MPLA and UNITA as two of the major parties that run in the country. They both had different roots in society, so they had different groups of people that they adhered to. But the MPLA was the long-standing ruling party, and in the beginning, right after independence, Angola was originally just a one-party system. But as UNITA started gaining more prominence around the country, it kind of became a multi-party system with other parties, but the two major parties that ran throughout the country were the MPLA and UNITA. Previously, there was also a party called the FNLA, but due to the lack of support for this party slowly disintegrated. But when it comes to UNITA, however, they had support from USA and South Africa, so they still pretty acting as their prominent opposition party. Angolan civil war basically happened majorly due to two reasons. Number one, the internal conflicts of the region itself. Secondly, because of the proxy operations of the Cold War. As I explained this case study to you, however, one thing you need to remember is the leader of opposition, UNITA's leader, Jonas Savimbi. He founded the Party 6, and it's been exactly under his ideology ever since. This video won't go over the entire history of the country itself, but you will see almost all the dynamics covered from 1990s to the 2000s and today. So we all know that a nation really becomes democratic when they start noticing that everyone around them is becoming democratic. It's deeply rooted in FOMO, and that's exactly what happened with Angola. All neighboring countries were slowly moving towards democracy, and Angola started considering moving towards democracy. One example is how the SADF, South African Defense Force, exited Namibia, helping Namibia form its own democratic state. This is when democracies truly started expanding within the African space, especially near Angola. This is when Angola's ruling party, MPLA-PT, which used to be a communist ruling party, decides that they would reject the Marxist-Leninist ideology and moves. They encourage the building of other parties because they wanted to be a state with a multi-party system and a democratic state that is deeply rooted in the rule of law. With the up and coming of new states, you always have skepticism, especially in one of MPLA's big promises right now is to make Angola a rich and sovereign state based in their oil and diamond industries. A good example of how foreign relations control much of what happens in the state as it tries to establish itself as a sovereign state, seen through what we know from lobbying by Savimbi. Black Monofront and Stone is a lobbying firm based in Washington, D.C. This is in the era of the presidency of George W. Bush, when Savimbi decided to go to this firm and he gave them $5 million. He asked for two things. Number one, he wanted them to convince the federal government to start giving him money to run his country because he found the MPLA to be incompetent. Secondly, he wanted the press internationally to look at Savimbi as a reformer, and to create this kind of presence, he approached this lobbying firm with $5 billion. Surprisingly, not only did they agree, they ended up pulling it off. Savimbi started receiving $60 million per year, and this ran from 1985 to 1992, which totaled up to $420 million that were given to Savimbi. This was one of the greatest ways the party decided to make money. The federal government later did admit that they regretted spending so much money on the opposition party in Angola, but this is one of the greatest ways to see how sometimes smart power can be used to create a positive global perspective, but also to attain financial freedom. President Dos Santos decided to intervene by meeting Savimbi in Lisbon. This is where the Bices records were signed. It's called the Bices Accords because these were signed in Bices, Portugal. On 31st May 1991, they decided that this would be the major peace agreement between UNITA and MPLA. The transition for the country of Angola to become a democracy came under UN supervision. This was UN's mission UNAVAM 2. UNAVAM 2 is the United Nations mission that was held within the year of the presidential election to make sure that these presidential elections essentially stayed unbiased. The Bices Accords basically existed to demilitarize UNITA altogether. However, much of UNITA's violent force was directly affiliated to the government's troops. So once these troops were forbidden from working for UNITA under any circumstances, a lot of UNITA's power ended up going down. Now come the election. Angola held their first presidential elections in 1992 from 29th to 30th September. Dos Santos received 49.57% of the total votes and Savimbi received 40.8. But the election law dictated that they needed a second round because Savimbi, along with 8 other opposition parties, rightfully pointed out that there were many election observers that have noticed that this election was neither fair nor free. An official observation that was written in an Angolan newspaper was that there was very little UN supervision and 500,000 UNITA voters were disfranchised, and there were 100 clandestine polling stations, which was all forbidden under the policies adopted under UNIVAM 2. The government troops, however, did want to eliminate UNITA as they considered it a violent non-state actor. They detained hundreds of UNITA supporters. This was seen majorly as oppression because Savimbi held the power to control universal narratives. Now, this is where it starts to get really interesting. Have you ever wondered why diamonds were so expensive? It's not just because they're really rare. In fact, when you find a product and you're the only supplier of that product in the market, you can make its price as high as you want. This is exactly what De Beers decided to do. De Beers was the only diamond company that wanted to stay in power. And their strategy was to essentially buy all the diamonds in the world. They owned almost all the diamond reserves in Africa. They signed deals with Russia, Poland. This was known as one of the greatest monopolies in the global political economy, making them the only diamond supplier, essentially financed the opposition group in Angola under Savimbi, and this essentially became one of their highest sources of income for the entirety of the civil war.